My name is Jeff Goldwarn. I'm the general manager here at the Buckhead Club. And those of you that know me, I've never met a microphone I didn't like, but I will keep it short and brief and get it over to Frank in just a second. First thing I wanted to do is I wanted to welcome all of you. We're so proud of our partnership with Kettering here at the Buckhead Club and our speaker series. And this has been going on for some time. This is the largest one we've done thus far, and we so look forward to doing more in the future. Also, I have a message from Admiral Bob Wright, one of our board members, and he wanted to let everybody know that our military speaker series will be starting in Q2 now that we've gotten some of these things that you hear about on the news behind us. So before I turn the mic over to Frank, I did want to introduce just a few of our guests. First of all, our Buckhead Club board chairman and retired Marine Corps helicopter pilot, Mr. Bill Effinger, APD captain and retired Marine Corps reservist, Deputy Director of APD Communications, Captain Jeff Baxter, APD former SWAT and bomb tech. Now he's a major for Zone 2, which is us, Major Andrew Senzer. And then private sector coordinator and DSAC, also retired Marine, Charles Orgbon. And then a young man that's really important to me. I'm mentoring Joe for a while now. I'm really, really proud of him. Joseph Ledbetter, U.S. Army. He was just promoted to sergeant. He's at Fort Bragg, and we're really proud to have you here today. He also played for the Bulldogs. So that's that. And without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Frank Parisi.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone being here. I have the same problem that Jeff does, so I'll try to be as quick as possible because we definitely want to hear Jason instead of me talking. So first of all, I just want to say thanks to all the military folks that are here. Thanks to the law enforcement folks that showed up. When we started to set this whole thing up, Jason asked, he said, hey, if you could do me a favor, I love the law enforcement group. I love the fire group. Any of those folks local that you get to come would be an honor for me to have them there. So thank you all for attending. Really do appreciate it on behalf of Jason. And also for all the military folks that have showed up. And some of the folks that are here have amazing stories themselves. And I just want to start off with, if we could, give them a quick round of applause and thank you for your service. So with that, how this whole thing kind of got started, the Carson family back there knocked us. We were at the ADS Warrior East event, and so we got to go over the summer. When we got there, first of all, they were having a hard time even getting me in, right? This is an elite group of folks, really great people in the military, and they do some great work. They finally got me in, and I was able to run over the keynote speaker, which was Jason Redmond. And so I've been following him on Instagram and Twitter, and his social media is absolutely amazing. And so I was so happy to hear that he was speaking. So I was able to go in there. Les will tell you I was like a kid. I was running around taking pictures. I was posting it as he was talking and just really pumped up. Afterwards, we got a chance to meet Jason and have some really great conversation one-on-one. A very warm, welcoming type of person. And we started talking about Kettering, started talking about the Buckhead Club, some of the things that we do here, some of the stuff that Jeff allows us to do here, right, and this great partnership that we have. And he said, well, let me know when. I'd love to come down there and we could chat about all these wonderful things that you just heard, and plus we put a little bit more of a personalized twist to it with Kettering, Buckhead Club, and what you guys want to do. So with that, we finally got him to come down, and also we would recognize his lovely wife, Erica. She's the woman behind the trident over there, and she's just absolutely fantastic. She's the one who kind of does all that background. Yeah, let's give her a round of applause. She's just a great, great lady. Truly, she is that woman behind the trident. We just thought that was badass, as Tracy and I were talking about when we heard that's her title. And so with that, we got to talk, form a great relationship. We finally got him down here, and we're just really happy. We had dinner last night together. We've gotten to know each other as he's working on being here, having a lot of calls, a lot of discussions about how this event should go. I've got some bullet points, and I normally don't do this, and I don't want to show any dishonor, but I'm going to read a few of these pieces out just because it's so impressive. Of course, Jason was born in Ohio, served 21 years in the U.S. Navy, 11 years as an enlisted SEAL, a training instructor for SEAL teams, 10 years as a SEAL officer, and he graduated with honors from Old Dominion University. And then, of course, the books that he's written, they're outside We got them here for sale. He'll personalize them and sign them. I've got mine at home. It's absolutely wonderful. It's just like his presentations. It's very personal. But his military honors here, I have to read this, and it's something I don't do. Bronze Star Medal with Valor, Purple Heart, Medal, Navy Commendation Medal, Joint Service Achievement Medal, Navy Achievement Medal, 5 awards, Combat Action Ribbon, 2 awards, U.S. Army Ranger Tab, and numerous other service awards, right? And so when I was talking about how to kind of present Jason, they said, just call him Captain America, right? Get him up there. He's that guy. You know, he's also a Ranger, he's a SEAL. You know, he's just one of these great people also, right? He's a smart guy, an interesting person, and someone we're so proud to have here. So, Jason, come on up. Love to talk to you.
Jason Redmond, he is a retired Navy SEAL who was wounded while deployed in Iraq.
So in September of 2007, I was literally at the height of my career. Everybody in life at some point is going to walk into an ambush. Some sort of catastrophic event that's going to rock your world and have this impact on your life. The majority of people who walk this earth have never wrestled with an enemy combatant in the deep blackness of night. I quickly realized I was helpless. I was totally pinned down in front of my guys, and there was nothing I could do. I would have given anything to be out of this situation. That day became a benchmark for me. It changed everything in my life. I realized in that moment that I got a second chance at life. Most people, you only get one shot to go through this life and make the most of it. And most people take it for granted. In an ambush, we talk about the point of attack. It's called the X. The reason I survived the one that I was in is because we got off the X. And I said, okay, let's drive forward. We can do this. But everybody out there will go through life ambushes. And these are these hard moments that come along and just knock us off our feet. Because we've all been in that situation where we're like, oh my God, I can't make payroll. How am I going to bring in some revenue right now? We can't make rent. I've felt it. I realized the mark of a man is not found in his past, but how he overcomes adversity and builds his future. But the great thing about major life ambushes, they also can define you and make you better, just like that ambush that I went through. If you can create balance in these 5 key areas of something I call the Pentagon of peak performance, I guarantee you will be ready for any ambush that comes along. When I was wounded, I had gone through that journey where I had colossally failed as a leader, where I had guys say, kick him out and take his trident. It is the hardest road I've ever walked in my entire lifetime. But it built tremendous mental leadership. The only thing stopping you from accomplishing greatness in your life is you. When you are struggling, get off the X and overcome.
All right, good afternoon, Kettering and the Buckhead Club. What's going on, everybody? Nah, you got to be louder than that. You got to give me a little more energy. That's a little better. I spoke at the Naval Academy a couple of weeks ago, and I was the first speaker of the day, so it was kind of early. And I did the same thing, and it was lame and pathetic. And I said, oh, well, I see that, you know, obviously West Point did so much better than you guys. And boy, immediately they were ready to fight. So just a shout out, I want to reiterate my love and respect for all the members of our military and armed forces. As a SEAL, one of the great things about special operations is we work in a very joint environment. And I worked with literally every branch of the military. And make no mistake, the American military is by far the premier military in the world. We need to make sure we maintain it that way, and that's our job as the people of this country. I'm one of them now. I am a civilian. Much respect also for our law enforcement and fire. I just have tremendous respect for anyone when, you know, crises are going down and everybody else is trying to run away, and they're like, hey, I'm going to where the crisis is. First thing I want to do is address the elephant in the room. I hear this all the time. You know, people meet me and they're like, huh, I thought you'd be bigger. First off, that hurts. I have feelings. Hurts even worse when it comes from the ladies. But it's true. SEALs, believe it or not, and granted, I am on the smaller end of the spectrum for most SEALs, but the average SEAL really isn't that big. 5'10" and 180 is the average SEAL. The training is so intense and it's so hard on the body. We don't have a lot of bigger guys. It's tough for them to make it through training. We do have some. There are some big SEALs. I think the biggest I know was one of my troop chiefs. He was about 6'6", 310. But that is very unusual because most of the time the amount of pounding and the amount of things you have to do with your body weight, including wearing 50 to 60 pounds of body armor and gear, just takes a toll on you. So 2005, I encountered the first crisis of my life, a pivotal, overwhelming moment. A lot of people out there have encountered moments like these. It is a moment of failure, a moment of crisis, a moment of devastation. But I'll never forget, in this moment, I was standing at attention at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan in front of my commanding officers and senior members of my team, and I was being told, you're not measuring up. You're not stepping up to the levels of leadership that you need as a SEAL. And we're questioning whether we should keep you as a SEAL leader or not. And those words hit me like a bat to the head. And I was dismissed and told, come back tomorrow morning, we'll let you know your fate. And I remember walking out of that room, as I walked back to my room, thinking to myself, there's no hope. Like, my life is over. I remember thinking to myself, there's nothing I can do. Thinking to myself, it is totally outside of my control. And then I thought to myself, it is the end. And everybody in life encounters these moments. You know, everybody in here is old enough, as I look across this room, to know that you all have reached one of these moments, one of these pivotal, colossal, catastrophic moments in your life where we think it's the end. Some of you might be in one of those moments right now. Well, I would tell you that for every the end moment you have, it can become a new beginning. And for so many of us that are out there that have managed to pick ourselves up and drive forward and grind and figure out what is the new path and welcome the opportunity for that adversity, it can become an amazing journey. And that's what exactly happened to me. Thankfully, we don't have time today for me to get into all the details on what that leadership failure is and what happened. You can read all about it in my book, The Trident. It is the reason it is called the forging and the reforging of a Navy SEAL leader, because this moment became the reforging of my life, which made me into the individual that I am today, to be able to talk about leadership from such a personal perspective. Because out of that moment, I got a second chance. And as I drove forward, I realized it's never too late. It's never too late to drive forward from these the end moments. It's never too late to reinvent yourself. It's never too late to make a difference with the people around you, to lift others up, to grind forward. And that's exactly what I started doing. From that moment, I was told, Red, you're going to go back and you're going to lead another platoon. But here's what's going to happen. They said, if you mess up at all, we're going to take your trident. So we're going to put an unofficial letter of reprimand in the commanding officer's safe. And those in the military know that for an officer in the military, an official letter of reprimand is the end of your career. No officer can get a letter of reprimand. They basically say, we have no confidence in your leadership abilities, and that cannot stand in a career where lives are on the line with your decision making. But my commanding officer believed in me. He said, I have faith in you. He said, we need to humble you. He said, you're arrogant. You need to learn what it is to lead. So I'm going to make this an unofficial letter. And you go forth and lead, and you set that example. And he said, and this letter gets shredded, and it's gone. So go out there and get yourself back on track. Over the next couple of months, I kind of wrestled with who I was and where I wanted to go and how I got myself back on track. And I started to look at the basics of what it is to be an effective leader, what it is to be balanced, what it is to set that example, what it is to motivate and inspire others around you. And I began to realize I was really out of balance. I realized there were some critical areas of my life I needed to get back into. That the reality is the title you wear as a leader, boss, CEO, chairman, lieutenant, commander, admiral, general, major, none of that matters. It's merely a title. It's merely words on a piece of paper. What matters is how we carry ourselves in our lives, how we drive forward, how we set the example in leadership. And that became that foundational level for me as I talked to one of my most respected commanding officers while I was in Ranger School and said to him, I don't know if anybody will ever follow me again after the mistakes that I made. And he said, Red, people will follow you if you give them a reason to. He said, that's the essence of leadership. He said, go back to that school, crush it, and come back to the SEAL teams and give the guys a reason to follow you. And it led to the development of these 5 areas. And I told myself from this point forward, man, I'm going to focus on leading myself. I'm going to focus on motivating and inspiring my ability to lead others. And I'm going to focus on leading always. The good, the bad, the ugly, the hard times, the good times. When I'm out at a bar or when I'm on the battlefield, I will lead. And I will accomplish that through these 5 key areas. And that's what I began to focus on. Number 1, I focused on physical leadership. As a leader in this life, and make no mistake, every single person in this room is a leader. If you're sitting here right now and you say to yourself, well, I'm not a leader, I'm a spouse, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, you're a leader. And we need to motivate and inspire more leaders in this country to step up and lead at all times. This country is starving for leadership. But it starts with this physical machine you walk around in. And this machine we walk around in is an amazing thing. It's miraculous in its abilities. But most of us abuse it. We don't take very good care of it. We're constantly self-medicating. I was, as a young leader, making mistakes, drinking. Physical leadership is that foundational level. And for me, I started to realize that I needed to get back to the basics as a SEAL leader. I needed to crush it in everything I did. It didn't mean that I was going to be the best at everything I did physically. But it meant the guys would look at me and say, man, that guy puts out at everything he does. He may not be the fastest runner. Actually, I was the fastest runner. But they may say he may not be the strongest. He may not be the fastest swimmer. But you know what? He always put it out there. Anytime we had an evolution, I'd look at the biggest guy and I'd say, I'm going to carry that guy. So I showed that I always had those physical abilities. It translates into everything you need to do. These aren't SEAL qualities. These are human qualities. Because the reality is, as leaders, it takes tremendous amounts of energy. It takes tremendous amount of emotional toll. There's constant amounts of stress on us as leaders. And having strong physical leadership builds your abilities to endure that stress. Builds a strong immune system. It builds all these things to build the foundation of being an effective leader. Little did I know that building my physical leadership back up to the highest level it had been since I'd been through SEAL training would later save my life. We'll talk about that in a minute. Next level I started to focus on was mental leadership. Ego and arrogance were unfortunately close friends that I was walking with. And when I became a young SEAL officer after being an enlisted member, I thought a little too highly of my abilities. I thought I was like God's gift for leadership, like I was Patton reincarnated or something walking into the SEAL teams, which was not true. And I started to get back to, okay, leadership is a journey that never ends. I don't care what age you are, we're always learning new things as leaders. And in order to do that, we constantly have to be absorbing information. We constantly have to be seeking. We constantly have to be challenging our beliefs. And I became a voracious reader of every leadership book I could find. I started to look at who are the leaders that I want to emulate. And I reached out to them and said, hey, will you mentor me? And I also closely started to watch the leaders that I didn't like their leadership style, or they weren't very good and they were considered not that good. And I said, how do I not be like them? That journey really grew all the way up into the point that I graduated from Ranger School. And that really became the beginning point, because when I left Ranger School and headed back to the SEAL teams, it wasn't like I received this open arm welcome, like, hey, Red, we're so glad you're back. Nah, man, we are a hard bunch of individuals. And just because you screwed up and suddenly come back, that doesn't change things. For them, they were like, oh yeah, you're that dude that made those mistakes in Afghanistan. Yeah, we really don't want to work with you. So every day I had to focus on one step at a time. Lead yourself, lead others, lead always. Set that example in everything you do. And it drove me to the next level, which was emotional leadership. In this life, man, we are hit with all kinds of information. Positive, negative, a lot more negative in this day and age. I mean, just watch the news or jump on social media. I mean, it'll drag you down. But the reality is, as a leader, we have to be emotionally even-keeled. Good or bad, we need to be able to set that example. We need to motivate and inspire. And it became my new goal that I was going to lift every guy up that I work with. It didn't matter the situation. This picture was taken after a pretty hardcore target in a firefight we had gotten into. I was going around talking to the guys, firing them up, making sure our security was set as we were doing our after action, basically interrogating some of the bad people we had captured while we were continuing to hold that security on a target that we knew could potentially erupt into bigger firefights after that point. Doesn't matter what the situation is, you can be positive. Positivity is a choice. That is high-level emotional leadership. Understanding how we operate, how we deal, and making sure that we adhere to that tenet of leading always. Number 4 became social leadership. How do I build the rings of influence around me? So many times in this life, especially in the Western world, we place a lot of emphasis on our jobs, our occupation, and we tie ourselves to it. Especially if it's a high-level job that may bring you into the spotlight, like being a SEAL or a firefighter, police, maybe a professional athlete. We sometimes take for granted the other people around us. And I began to realize how critical it was that I needed to be investing in every aspect of my life. Not just my teammates, not just other branches that I was interacting with, not just the military side of the equation. I needed to make sure that I was putting time and effort into everything around me. So in social leadership, it was critical that we invest in our teams. Most people put all their time and effort into that outermost ring, their work relationships. And then acquaintances and friends starts to become, and these are work, a lot of the people in this room are your acquaintances and friends. And the SEAL teams, these were the guys that I would hang out with most of the time. Then it gets into our close friends. These may be the people you grew up with, your best friends. And then that innermost ring is that family. And I meet so many people who are in the SEAL teams, who are in the military, who are in a professional occupation that get to the end of their life and say, why didn't I put more time and effort into those innermost rings? In this life, we all ride along on trains. I rode the SEAL train. It's quite awesome. You guys are riding along the Buckhead Club train. Some of you are on the Kettering train. Some of you are on the martial arts train. But the reality is, we all have these ideas of when we're going to get off that train. It may be the next stop. It may be way further down the line. We may have an idea that we're going all the way to the end of the line. It may be Harry Potter's stop. I don't know. That's up to you. But the bottom line is this, that at some point, we have to get off the train. One of the amazing things I found in my career is that when emergencies happen, we sometimes get thrown off the train before we ever thought we were going to. That's exactly what happened to me. I got chucked off the SEAL train. And when I got thrown off the SEAL train, my teammates, my close friends, faded away. Not because they didn't like me or had anything against me at that point. It was because they were still riding that train. This is the most critical thing you need to understand, because who comes with you when you get off the train are your close friends and your family. And I will tell you this, at the end of your life, you will not look back and say, man, I wish I had done more in my occupation. I wish I had played football more. Because as a guy who was laying on the battlefield bleeding out, thinking that I wasn't coming back, not once did I think to myself, man, I really wish I had shot a couple more rounds. Really wish I had flipped open that tactic book one more time. All I thought about in those final moments was, man, I would give anything to tell my wife and kids I love them one more time. Make sure you're investing in the right rings of social leadership. It is a balance. It is a balance in this life. It's one of the most critical things as a leader. And if you do that, you will be ready for the unexpected problems that are coming along. And then the last level, guys, was the spiritual leadership level. And spiritual leadership for some people, for me, I got deeper back into my faith. It's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to believe in that or buy into that. So when I talk to people about spiritual leadership, I talk about getting outside yourself. Understanding that there's a great big world out there. There's billions of people on this planet. And I meet so many people who will tell me, I've got this problem or that problem. I've got this major work crisis, or I've got this physical ailment. And yes, that's tough. But guess what, man? There are people right now somewhere out there in the world that are born into a war zone, that are born into sexual slavery, that are born into horrendous conditions that, thankfully, we don't have here. We still have freedom of choice. We have the ability to try and shape the outcome. And that's tremendous spiritual leadership. The other thing, I became much more humble in my leadership style. I started looking at the leaders who led as humble servants and servant-style leadership. And one of those leaders who was a mentor of mine pointed something out to me about this time. And he said, Red, I want to point something out to you. He said, I want you to understand how this works. Mission, men, self. He said, it should always be that way. Never get those confused. He said, I want to point something out to you, something that I had never seen when I was younger. This emblem, the trident. It's kind of an interesting thing how the trident came to be. Back in the SEAL teams go all the way back to World War II. Back then we were called the Scouts and Raiders. We were the guys who swam across the beach at Normandy. 75% casualties that day. Went forward into Korea and Vietnam, but the SEAL teams didn't have an emblem until the early 70s. And it was at that point they were sitting around a fire, and they were like, hey, we need to come up with an emblem. And they kept submitting emblems to the Navy. Most of them looked like aviator wings or some type of warfare device like that. And of course, the other Navy branches would say, or warfare sides of the Navy would say, no, looks too much like ours. No, it looks too much like ours. No, we don't like it. So rumor is they were sitting around a fire one night and they were drinking a tasty beverage. And they looked at the bottle on that tasty beverage, which happened to be produced by Anheuser-Busch. And you may not notice, but if you look at the Anheuser-Busch Eagle and the Trident, they're a little bit similar. And apparently in their slightly chemically unbalanced state, they submitted this giant emblem, the Trident, to the Navy as kind of an FU. It is the largest warfare device in the entire Navy, probably one of the largest in the military. The actual Trident, the one you see on my chest is a mini Trident. The actual one is about 2.5 inches across and about 1.5 inches wide. And they submitted it thinking that there's no way the Navy will approve this. And the Navy did. The thing that I didn't know about it, what the SEAL Trident represents, the eagle obviously represents America. The anchor represents the Navy. The eagle represents America and obviously our ability to come from the air. SEAL is an acronym, sea, air, and land. So from the air. The anchor represents the Navy. The Trident represents from the sea. And the flintlock pistol represents our ability to operate on land. But what my leader told me, he said, Red, I want you to look at this Trident. So do you notice anything unique about it? Of course, I didn't see it. If you look at any emblem in the United States military, the United States government, the eagle has his head held high, always looking up, grand, majestic. Navy SEAL Trident is the only emblem in the entire United States military that the eagle has its head down. And he said to me, that is a sign of humility. It is a sign of understanding the sacrifice that you are carrying on, that you are leading men that someday may go to their deaths. He said, and we have to uphold that. We have to live for that. We have to lead for that. And that is spiritual leadership. And I carried that forward as I started to move back on my path as a young leader in the SEAL teams. Getting things back on track, earning back my credibility and my reputation as a tactical leader. Guys started to say, hey, Red, you're doing a good job. I was building everything back. 2 years later, I showed up in Iraq during what we call the Anbar Awakening. It was a period of time, those who were in Iraq in 2006, 2007 was some of the most volatile times in Iraq, both in Baghdad and in the Anbar province, Fallujah, Ramadi. Some of the most intense fighting that we saw occurred in those years. Most of our casualties came out of that time. And I showed up in April and we were hitting targets almost every single night, going after mid-level and high-level Al-Qaeda and insurgent leaders. Virtually every night was a gunfight all the way, and it was fantastic. I managed to get my career back on track. It was everything that I had signed up to be. And all of a sudden, at one moment as I went through that deployment, it came to a grinding halt. But almost every night looked like this. September 13, 2007 was a night that totally changed my life. We were 1 week from going home from that deployment. Everything was back on track. Guys were like, Red, you did an amazing job on this deployment. I'd be glad to work with you again. I'd been recommended for the next leadership position. I'd actually been recommended to screen and was coming back from that deployment for our next tier SEAL team. Everything was good. We had packed everything up. We were waiting for the next team to fly in to do our turnover operations and head home. And on September 13, we got word that the #1 leader for Al-Qaeda in the Anbar province was going to be in a specific time and location, something we call a time-sensitive target. A guy we had been hunting all deployment, a very dangerous, evil individual responsible for dozens of coalition deaths. He had shot down his team had shot down a Marine Corps CH-46 helicopter in the fall of 2006. He ran multiple IED cells. He ran multiple sniper cells. We really wanted him because he killed a fellow SEAL right at the very beginning of our deployment, Petty Officer Clark Schwedler. We were told this guy was going to be someplace we had been before, a place called Karma, Iraq, outside of Fallujah. And we launched on that mission, and I was fortunate enough to be the assault force commander for the actual target takedown. We had broken into 3 different elements. So we had the actual assault force on the building itself he was supposed to be in. We had an external security team, and then we had the headquarters element. And I remember flying in, going through my last minute checks. And of course, already as we flew in, we took down the target, and I remember just breathing a sigh of relief. We went in, we thought we got him, we missed him, but nobody was injured and nobody was killed. I'm thinking to myself, all right, well, hopefully we can get this guy another time, but hey, mission, men, sell. We found a whole lot of IED making components on the target. We were gonna blow that in place. It was about 2 a.m. in the morning at this point, and we were getting ready to fly out, and all of a sudden the snipers started, hey, we got a whole lot of movement on another house about 150 yards away. My boss, ground force commander, came up and said, hey, Red, why don't we just watched 5 guys flee out of this house, ran across the street. They're hiding in some vegetation across the street, something we'd seen before, you know? And he said, I want you to take your team. Let's go up there. Let's wrap these guys up. Let's find out what they know. Maybe they know where our leader is. So I took my team, and to make a long story short, what we didn't know is that leader had been in the house we were originally in, and then he had moved 150 yards away to what we call a bed down location, or a place he was going to sleep for the night. He had about a 15 to 16 man security element comprised of very, very well-trained foreign fighters. Many of them wore suicide vests. They had been trained that if we got too close to the leader, they would clack themselves off to try and take us out. And what they had done is they had staged an ambush line in that vegetation across from that house. 2 PKM machine guns, which fires a bullet about the size of my thumb, and multiple AK-47 shooters. My team and I were coming up from the south side in this vegetation, moving up on this enemy force that we weren't aware of. We could tell there were 3 or 4 guys. We had some air assets up overhead giving us an update. And we were given word that, hey, you're going to miss these guys. Turn to the northeast, and you're gonna pick up one of them. Sure enough, as we were moving up to the northeast, we had moved to the northeast corner. We were actually out in the open except for my medic, who literally stepped on an enemy fighter. Enemy fighter rolled over and tried to engage him, and he put that guy down. But what we didn't realize is that when we came out to the northeast and moved into the open part of the field, we had walked directly into their ambush line. And it was at that moment that both machine guns opened up on us. My medic was initially hit. He took a round right below the knee that severed both bones and anchored him right to the ground. One of our other guys ran forward to grab him. He was shot 3 times. Beast of a guy, and still managed to drag him back to the only point of cover we had, which was a large John Deere style tractor tire about 15 yards behind me here. I was out front at this point. I was trying to lay down fire for our guys as they moved back. I was yelling out commands. Anybody who's ever been in the military in a gunfight knows that the enemy, especially seasoned enemy, know shoot the guy yelling. And I watched as both machine guns turned on me in that moment. And I got to tell you, that is a very uncomfortable feeling. I know we're in Georgia, so a lot of people shoot. I will tell you, it's much better to be on the sending end of a gun and not on the receiving end. Because at that point, man, I wanted to get about as small as possible. I'd been shot at quite a bit, but never like that. I literally could feel rounds going by me, the sonic crack like angry bees buzzing by me. I later had holes in my clothing. I was stitched across the body armor. I took 2 rounds in the left elbow, which I thought shot my arm off. I took rounds off my helmet. I had my left night vision tube shot off. I took rounds off my weapon. And at this point, realizing this was not a good place to be, I turned to try and move back to that tire. And it was at this point that I caught a round in the face. It hit me right in front of the ear, traveled through my face, exited the right side of my nose, blew out my right cheekbone. What was left of my cheekbone broke and kicked out to the right. It vaporized my orbital floor. It broke all the bones above my eye. Broke the head of my jaw, shattered my jaw to my chin. My eye dropped into this newfound hole in my face, and it knocked me out. "96 hours later, I found myself laying in a hospital bed in Bethesda, Maryland, struggling to wrap my head around what had happened. How did I get here? I remember laying in that bed being inundated by teams of doctors. I was so messed up from the blood loss, from the massive amount of damage, and all these teams of doctors were in the room walking through the process of putting me back together and how long it was going to take and what an uphill journey. They're telling me, "Lieutenant Redmond, you have no use of your left hand. You have massive nerve damage. Your elbow's been totally destroyed. We're thinking about amputating your arm. Your face has been totally mangled. We need to reconstruct both your face, your nose, your orbit, your jaw." I was wired shut. I was trached. They were feeding me through a stomach tube. I was too weak from the blood loss to even get out of bed. I remember at one point asking, how long is this going to take? I actually asked how many months. I was like, how many months is this going to take to put me back together? And the doctor incredulously was like, "Months?" It's like, "Lieutenant, it's going to take years to put you back together." Years. I remember laying in that bed thinking to myself, how did this happen? Like, I just got my career back on track. I just went through the hardest journey I've ever been through to build back my credibility and professional reputation with my teammates, one of the best fighting forces in the world, and now I'm laying in a hospital bed and I need nurses help me to go to the bathroom. About that time, I had a couple other individuals that had been in the room, and they were having a conversation off to the side, but I was picking up pieces of it. And they were saying, what a shame, what a pity. We send these young men and women off to war and they get broken and battered, and they're never going to be the same. They're never going to be the same. They're never going to be able to get back out there and be successful. And you have to understand, I used to get a little angry about this conversation, but you have to understand, if you've never been in a military hospital during a time of war, it is a very overwhelming place to be. After I was wounded, I would go back on a regular basis to try and visit guys and gals. And in a military hospital in time of war, you see men and women at their, young men and women at their worst. Blown apart, missing limbs, burned, traumatic brain injuries. So I don't blame them for the conversation they were having. But I hated the fact of what they were doing. See, frequently in this life, people see circumstances that you're in and they want to place you into a box. The victim box, as I call it. They want to paint a picture for you, the future for you. And unfortunately, if you're willing, you'll buy into it. I remember sitting there thinking to myself as all this was happening and what they were saying. And once again, I came full circle and I was like, man, it is the end. Like, where do I go from here? I remember thinking to myself, there's no hope. It's no hope. Like, I'm forever disfigured, permanently disabled. My special operations career is over. I remember thinking to myself, there's nothing I can do. Everything's totally outside of my control. Anybody ever felt this way? All of us. The rest of you are liars. You're welcome. Here's the thing about this life, guys. In those moments, they're coming for all of us. In the military, we have a term for this. We call it the X. My entire special operations career, I had trained to try and place the enemy on the X, to put them in a specific location that I could either capture or kill them. In that gunfight, I found out what it's like to be on the receiving end of that. And all those feelings come into play. Massive, overwhelming feelings, massive feelings of no hope, feelings of there's nothing I can do, it's all outside of my control. And what I realized as I lay there processing all this information, I felt like I was right back in that gunfight in Iraq. Except it wasn't the bullets and bombs of battle. It was the bullets and bombs of life. I call these moments life ambushes. And the interesting thing about them, they're no different than a regular ambush. I know there's a lot of you that are listening to this story and you're probably thinking to yourself, you're so full of it, there's no way I can connect with what you're saying. I can't connect with, being all shot up on the battlefield and being told that I'm going to have my arm amputated or this or that. But the reality is you can. Because when you're going through a major life ambush, when you're going through a the end moment, when you're going through with a catastrophic failure that happens to all of us, when you're sitting on the X, and I was to hook you up to medical devices that measured your heart rate, breathing, brainwave activity, it would be almost identical to mine in that gunfight. Because the human body doesn't say, oh, I'm in a gunfight and ratchet it up to level 10. It just says I'm in a crisis. That's what makes the difference. It's the same. But here's the most important thing you need to understand. As a human, we all have the ability to overcome. If someone tells you you can't do something, if someone places you in that victim box, if you feel like there's no hope, if you feel like it's all outside of my control, if you feel like there's nothing I can do, that is a lie. Because the greatest gift you have as a human, your ability to overcome, comes down to one critical thing. You have a choice. You have a choice. Free will and how you will react to any bad situation you were in. And I remember laying in that bed thinking to myself, where do I go from here? And then I told myself, I overcome. It is what I do. We will drive forward. You have been through hard positions before. You have been on the X before. You can't lay here and feel sorry for yourself. You have designed a plan. Physical leadership, mental leadership, emotional leadership, social leadership, spiritual leadership. You will get up and drive forward. It is a choice when bad things happen. And guess what? I got bad news, because bad things happen to good people all the time. You can't lay there and feel sorry for yourself. You've got to drive forward. So as those people left that room talking about what a shame, what a pity, and the long-haired admiral came back into the room, that's what I call my wife. One, because she's awesome. And two, because I run this household. Right, honey? She came back into the room, and I couldn't talk. All I could do was write. And I wrote to her, never again. I said, never again. No one is going to come into this room feeling sorry for me, because from this point forward, I refuse to feel sorry for myself. I will lift others up. I will make a difference. And I wrote out this sign. And it said, attention to all who enter here. If you're coming in this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds I received, I got in a job that I love, defending the freedom of a country that I love. I got in a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country that I deeply love. I'll make a full recovery. What is full? That's the absolute utmost physically. I have the ability to recover. And I'm going to push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you are not prepared for that, go elsewhere. And we signed it, the management, because obviously it needed additional level of credibility. Every time I read that, I laugh. I'm like, what was I thinking? We put it on the door and we said, nobody's allowed into this room until they read this sign. A couple of days after that sign got posted, a teammate of mine had come to visit. And as he was leaving, he took his trident off his chest and he tacked it into the wood on the door. And I got to tell you what an amazing moment it was for me, because I knew I had come full circle. That sign represented everything that the SEAL teams are about, the military is about, overcoming adversity is about. In my opinion, it represents everything America is about. And with that trident on the door, once again, they said, hey man, you set the example. You led the way we should lead. The sign went on to take on a life of its own. It ended up going viral. It was shown on all these major news networks. It was written about, blogged about. They've done documentaries about it. It's been written in Secretary Robert Gates wrote about it in his book. First Lady Michelle Obama wrote about it not once, but twice in her book. It moved her so much. It earned me an invitation to the White House to meet President Bush, who later signed it. And now we dedicated it. It's framed and it hangs in the Wounded Ward at Walter Reed. And wounded warriors now go by it and touch it before they go to surgery. I don't tell you that to say, hey, look at me. I'm this guy that wrote this sign. I'm so awesome. I tell you that because that is the power of positivity in the face of negativity. That is the power of leading yourself, of leading others, of leading always. And that is what we have to do in this life. The end moments are coming for all of us. But the great news is, if you are willing to get up, so often they become new beginnings. These moments when we think there's no hope, there's always hope. Hope's driven from within. That's all it is. Hope is a belief that we can create a better or a different outcome than the one we're in. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to get back the world or what you had prior. I never operated as a SEAL on the battlefield again. But instead, I charted a new path, a new beginning. There's nothing I can do. There's always something you can do, always. Even if it is merely maintaining a positive mindset and lifting others up. And then it's outside of my control where we control what we can. I was able to control my mindset. I was able to control the influence I had on the people around me. And one of the biggest things I realized laying in that bed is all around me in that hospital, there were young men and women struggling, hurting. And I realized it's up to us to be that light in the darkness. You can lead from anywhere, including a hospital bed. So how do we do that? So many of you are like, man, this is intense. How do I get off the X? Well, you get off the X by building that overcome mindset. You get off the X by making a positive choice, that understanding that bad things are going to happen. Life ambushes are coming for all of us. You may be in one right now. You may be coming out of one, or there's one on the horizon waiting for you. But having a mindset that this is coming is what makes the difference. That is an overcome mindset. That is what makes a difference as a leader. So getting off the X comes down to one critical thing. In order to get off the X, you have to react. REACT is an acronym I came about after working with wounded warriors, individuals that have been through trauma, now working with Fortune 500, 100 companies, elite performers. The bottom line is it will make a difference in your life when you find these moments that you're stuck on the X and you feel that overwhelming feeling of there's no hope, there's nothing I can do, it's all outside of my control. Number one, the first thing we have to do, R stands for you got to recognize your reality. And this is probably one of the biggest things. So many people, when we're in a crisis, we have a tendency to procrastinate or push it off or say, man, I wish this wasn't happening. It's just human nature. We don't want to admit that bad things are happening. Believe it or not, this actually happens on the battlefield. One time we were walking in on a target with some of our Iraqi counterparts, some of our scouts, and we started to take some gunfire. It wasn't a lot of gunfire, it was a little bit sporadic, but we got behind this wall. I remember being behind this wall and I'm looking down at the guys and kind of assessing what's going on. And I look out and one of our scouts is kind of standing out there about 15 yards out, and he's kind of standing and looking around a little bewildered. I look at my interpreter, I said, hey man, what's he doing? Our interpreter yells out to him, and the guy kind of looks over at us and he yells back, and I said, what'd he say? Our interpreter goes, he said, I think we're being shot at. Yes, we're being shot at. Get over here behind the wall, something that will stop bullets. People do this in life. People do this in business. And I got to tell you, leaders are some of the worst because sometimes we don't want to admit that there's a problem because we're now having to convey it to the rest of our team. And we're now having to come up with a strategy that may deviate from what we were currently doing. But the faster you can come to grips with this, the faster you can accept that there is a crisis. Houston, we've got a problem. The faster you're going to start the process of getting off the X. Number two, we got to evaluate our assets. Those feelings of there's no hope, it's outside of my control, there's nothing I can do, usually are coupled with one, the initial impact, the bombs and bullets of life that make us feel overwhelmed. And two, we're so focused on the pain and misery that we're not thinking about what tools we have to bring to bear to the problem. That night when I was laying there taking that under this enemy fire in the middle of that ambush, I remember starting to think about training because I'd been doing it for a while. Even though I'm shot up and there's gunfire literally traveling over me, I started to think about this is a bad situation. What do we have to bring to bear to this problem? I remember thinking my teammates were in another house 150 yards away. We had a Marine Corps quick reaction force on standby about 2 kilometers away. I had drones overhead. I had Navy helicopters pushed out to the west. I had an AC-130 gunship overhead, which ended up bringing in the closest fire mission in the entire Iraq war. We literally called fire directly on our position, or my team leader did. And then I had an Army Special Operations Aviation medevac helicopter on standby, which later would save my life. These were the tools in my toolbox. And when we're in a crisis, this is what gives you power. This is what gives you confidence to be able to say, okay, we got a problem. Whether it's a physical problem, professional problem, or a personal problem, knowing what tools we have. Maybe it's a doctor. Maybe it's a counselor. Maybe it's a priest. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's a friend. Doesn't matter. These become your assets. These become your tools. And we gather them together, which leads us to step 3 of assessing possible options and outcomes. But there's an interesting thing that happens. In step 1 and 2, recognize and evaluate, usually these are slow. We're trying to figure out where we're going, we're navigating what's happening, and then suddenly we figure out that we have tools, and there suddenly becomes this gigantic sense of urgency. Because nobody wants to be on the X. It sucks to be there. Bullets and bombs of life sucks even worse when it's the bullets and bombs of battle. And you want to get off the X as quickly as possible. But the problem is we need to take a pause. We call it a tactical pause in the military. We also like to say we need to let the battlefield develop. Sometimes when there's a crisis, we don't know all the things that are going on. This is where we bring our team together and we make sure we gather as much information as possible. And we make sure that we don't grab the wrong tool for the problem. The equivalent of grabbing a flathead screwdriver and rushing out to fix this engine across that lake of fire, and you get out there and you're like, damn it, it was a Phillips. And that happens a lot. So this is where we want to pause and we choose the best possible options and outcomes. Option A, what will be the outcome? We game it out, getting your team, your family, the people around you. Number 4, you choose a direction and communicate it. Nobody ever is on the X alone. The X has its own gravitational pull. If it's a personal ambush, your family gets pulled onto the X with you, your spouse, your kids. If it's a business ambush, your clients, your employees, your team members, your board members, your partners, they all get pulled onto the X with you. And in a crisis, everybody's waiting for what do we do next? Remember when I said everybody in here is a leader? Part of the SEAL ethos, in the absence of leadership, I will step up and lead. You have to lead. You have to step up. We've gone through this process, and it's at this point that we choose that direction and communicate it. We've gone through, we know what our tools are, we've decided what's going to be the possible option and outcome. You don't know what it is going to be, but you've decided that plan B, if you will, is going to be the best way to go. It's at this point we choose plan B and we communicate it to the people around us. This is what we're doing. We're moving now. And this accomplished some amazing things. One, it gives a sense of purpose, a sense of direction, and it gives hope. And then the last one, we've got to take action. So many people are waiting for the perfect moment. They develop this plan and then they're standing there waiting. In a gunfight, I've seen it where people are waiting for a lull in fire. Well, really highly trained forces like SEALs, we know how to offset our firing so that we pretty much can always be shooting. This guy's shooting while this guy's reloading all the way down the line. You can't wait for that lull. You'll end up dying on the X. But people do this in life. They do this in a business crisis. Oh, we got to wait till we close this next deal so we have the cash flow to deal with this problem as they bleed out financially. Or, oh, we're in this, I'm in a relationship crisis. Me and my spouse haven't spoken in months and things are so bad, but I'm going to wait till they're in a good mood to talk to them as their relationship bleeds out. The time to act is now. You've developed a plan, take action and move. And one of the greatest things is once you move, it creates momentum. And you may move from one X to the next, but use that momentum to continue and go. In the SEAL teams, oftentimes, if we got into an ambush, especially a vehicular ambush, we would say blow through, meaning we would use as much momentum as possible to try and blow directly through that ambush. We need to do the same things in life. Use that momentum. Because here's the most interesting thing. In order to get off the X is like quicksand. The longer you sit on it, the more it pulls you down and the harder it is to get up and go. And I've watched so many people in this life that have had a major crisis, personal, physical, or professional, who will sit on the X, feeling sorry for themselves, and end up dying. Not physically, although sometimes that does happen, but more mentally, emotionally, or financially. What I've come to find with working with amazing individuals, special operations forces, Olympic athletes, high-level companies, it is the individuals who get off the fastest who thrive. We don't have time to sit there and feel sorry for ourselves. When crises come, people tend to do three things. Number one, we look further down the road at the future and say, oh, this sucks. This was supposed to be the best year we ever had. Or more often than not, we look back at the past and say, man, I want back the world before COVID. Things were so much better then. Or we look in the moment in the misery, and then we do the age-old human thing of, we're here because somebody messed up or something happened. We look for someone or something to blame. None of that matters. All that matters is getting off the X as quickly as possible. Build a mindset to do this, and I guarantee you will accelerate forward in all aspects of your life. Here are the key takeaways for today. Number one, it is never too late. I don't care how bad the situation you are in. I don't care what crisis you are in, what relationship has broken, what leadership position has failed. It's never too late to come back. Because you will make a difference, even if it's only for 1 hour, for 1 day, for 1 week, for 1 month. Don't buy into the lies that it's too late. Number two, readiness and balance through the Pentagon of Peak Performance. In this life, we need to have balance. That balance is going to make a critical difference in everything you do. No different than amazing martial artists, our ability to move and flow with energy, our ability to absorb blows or move with it. Life is like that when these ambushes come along, and if you're out of balance, it's so easy to knock you down. Number three, you have a choice in this life and how you are going to deal with adversity. You can be like a lot of people out in this world and just focus on the negativity. It seems to be the current theme in the world today. Or instead, you could be a light in the darkness and shine the way for others. And then the last one, you've got to react to get off the X. That's what builds an overcome mindset. If you do these things, I guarantee you, you will be able to get off the X and overcome any crisis that you come up against. All right. I am fortunate enough to have written 3 books. We brought a few that I will be outside signing. I apologize. For some reason, several of the boxes did not make it. So I have copies of The Trident, my first book, which became a New York Times bestseller. That goes deep down the weeds of the mistakes I made as a young leader and how I started to grow up and figure things out. I wrote Overcome Next. It became the how-to. And then the last one, we wrote The Point Man Planner. How do you basically identify your mission in this life and build the parameters around it to execute and stay on course? I built 2 online courses, 72 Hours to Peak Performance, which talks about deeper into the Pentagon of Peak Performance and getting off the X and how to build an overcome mindset. For those of you who may not be able to get a book today, you can go to my website. We gave a discount code Buckhead. My books on my website are signed. If you go to Amazon, I don't sign those, because it's Amazon and I don't have it. And Jeff Bezos is making all that money. So, but if you go to my website, they are signed. There's a little box when you check out that says, hey Jay, could you please personalize this to me, my wife, my kids, my family, whatever it is. And when I'm home, I got a great team. They get all those books signed and they say, sit down and sign these books. And I do. And you can follow me on all the socials Frank talked about. I never talk about politics. There's enough people out there talking about politics. What I talk about is positivity. What I talk about is we need more leaders. What I talk about is we need more people to be that light in the darkness and tools that you can do that. And then the last thing, if you want to follow us more, you can take a picture of this. It'll give you, sign up for our mailing list. We put out a couple of newsletters a week on positivity. I do something every Monday called Monday Muster. It is just a positive leadership message on how you can better lead yourself, your team, or your family. And when you sign up, you can get these 2 handouts, the REACT methodology and Learn to Lead. I want to say thank you guys for having me and allowing me to share my story. I'd love to open it up for questions, and you can ask me anything. I'll answer the big one first, just because it always gets asked. I am the only Navy SEAL who did not shoot Osama bin Laden. Any questions at all if we have time? we have a few minutes for a few questions, and Jason would be happy to answer anything. Yes, sir.
I hate to be on a negative topic, but what have you heard about the recent death in the SEAL training? I'm a Yaley, the guy was a Yaley that died.
Yeah, great guy, and just everything I heard, he was an amazing young man. So those that may not know, it's been in the news. We had a student that died at SEAL training, although he did not die during training. And I think he actually completed Hell Week, our hardest part of training. And about 6 hours after completing, he went into medical duress. They took him to the hospital and he passed away. So there is an ongoing investigation. I have not heard anything else. Well, I'll just say what I've heard, I'm not going to put out in the public eye until the investigation is finished, both for the family and for the Navy. I will say this, I did some interviews on CNN about this. There are a lot of people that are like, oh, the training's too hard, if people are dying, and that's just not true. The reality is to train individuals to the level to be SEALs, Rangers, Army, MARSOC, at times it is dangerous. Combat is dangerous. And there is a balance between training to the highest levels and pushing people as far as we can and safety. And out there training, they do an amazing job of safety parameters. I was explaining on that interview, during Hell Week alone, students go through medical checks 2, if not 3 times a day. Full body check, they check their vitals, they check them from head to toe to see what level. You get a lot of sores and open abrasions during Hell Week, and they check them to make sure that's not developing into infection. And if they have any concerns that a student is in some kind of medical duress, they will pull them. It happens all the time. Students don't like it, but obviously we want to err on the side of safety. So I haven't heard anything yet, or anything that's public knowledge, but so, yes, sir.
Jason, wonderful story. How long did it take you to get your health back, physically, mentally, and then spiritually?
It took 4 years and 40 surgeries to get put back together. That was physically. Mentally, it probably took longer. I struggled with post-traumatic stress. I struggled with sleep. And I went through, there's a lot of great programs. I tell people that there is no one-stop shop for wounded warriors or for people that have been through trauma. Different programs work for different individuals, and I tell guys or gals, hey, you got to find what works for you. Don't give up hope if one thing worked for somebody else and it didn't work for you. And I went through a whole bunch of different programs that ultimately made a difference for me. And then physically, I talk about this in my book, Overcome, or at least getting back to where I was. I lied to myself for a while after I retired and told myself, well, you're broken. Plus, you don't need to work out. And because you're broken anyways, it doesn't matter. But it did matter. I wasn't taking care of myself. And I realized, hey, man, you got to get back. I'll never be the same person I was before I was wounded, but I talk often about this with individuals. How do you become the new 100% of yourself? I don't care if you're 90 or 19, where you are, given injuries or wherever you are in your life, you have the ability to get to your 100%, and that became my focus. So that probably was 7 years after I was wounded before I finally really started to focus on all those things and to be totally whole again. So, yes, sir.
Hey, thank you for your story. Thank you for your service as well. I really enjoyed your talk today. I was curious, you talked a little bit about some of the crises that were life-defining for you. Can you talk a little bit about what you tapped into in terms of your upbringing to allow you to see yourself through those crises and get to where you are right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Can everybody hear the question over there? Yeah. Okay, so the question was, in the major crisis you've been through, could you talk about how you tapped into your upbringing to make a difference through those crises? Interestingly enough, my upbringing, I didn't have a bad upbringing. I had, we didn't have any money. We were super poor. We lived in the backwoods of North Carolina. I wore hand-me-downs from, the church. I look forward to every year I got new hand-me-downs, which was really cool. But we didn't have a bad life. It's not like I grew up on the hard streets or anything like that. But there was just something in me from a young age that if you told me I couldn't do something, it fueled my fire to do it. It just drove me. So some of that, I think, was just imbued in my genetic DNA, and it's something we talk about at SEAL training. A lot of people want to know what enables someone to make it through SEAL training, and the Navy has expended millions and millions of dollars to try and figure that out. And at the end of the day, they've managed to get better, but they still, at the end of the day, we call it the no quit gene. It's the gene inside you that says, I can endure pain and discomfort longer than other people. And the reality is that's a little bit of a misnomer, because everybody has a breaking point. I mean, it may be death, but everybody at some point. But for those that make it through high-level training and things like that, you can just endure more than the average person. Beyond that, I think the rest just got shaped along the journey. A lot of people who don't know me and don't know my story will say, they automatically think that being wounded and what I went through was the hardest thing I've ever been through. But that leadership failure is by far the hardest thing I ever went through. So much so that I put a gun in my mouth and almost took my life in Afghanistan that night. That's how hard it was for me to be told that you don't measure up as part of this community that I worked so hard, to be a part of. That was a tremendous blow. And to earn back that, to walk that road with guys, honestly, that did not want to work with me when I first got assigned to my new troop. So, but that shaped so much for me to dig deep and say, hey man, you focus on one evolution at a time. You do good at this, and then you move to the next one. You don't rest on your laurels, you build the relationships and you keep driving forward. So I think it was the progression of all these things, and that's something that I tell people. It's your experiences that make the difference in this life as a leader. Don't shy away from the hard things, because it's the hard things that are gonna make you better. Routinely get out of your comfort zone. Do things, even as we get older. It's easy to get comfortable and to enjoy life we have built for ourselves, but unfortunately you never know what's coming. So I think routinely, I do it through fitness, I do it through, I'm going back into martial arts again, just because having a fighting mindset and being humbled by guys who are much better than you is good for you. And I think all those things come together to enable you to overcome adversity when those hard moments come. So, yes, sir.
I love that you recognize the Admiral. I don't think military spouses get enough credit for what they go through. Is there anything specific that stands out from how your wife supported you that contributed to your ability to overcome and recover?
1,000%. And as a matter of fact, our whole story is told in the Trident. A lot of people don't realize this is a love story. This is a love story. It's a leadership story. It's a redemption story. It's a combat story. But it's also a love story. It follows our journey. And there were multiple things. She is a rock and a rock star and amazing. When, I'll be honest, I tell a story in another talk. I talk about it in the book. The most fear I've ever felt in my life was flying home on that medevac plane back to Bethesda. I was terrified how Erica and the kids would react to me. I felt like I did not see myself in a mirror for almost 2 weeks after I was wounded. I did not want to. I was afraid at what I would see. And I felt like a monster. And I was terrified of how the kids would react. As a matter of fact, I did not let the kids see me until almost 3 to 4 weeks after I'd been home, which was actually a smart move later. But I was terrified of what she was going to say. And there's a lot of horror stories out there of wounded guys coming home and spouses seeing them and leaving. There are stories from, I read stories from Vietnam where they'd come into the hospital and take their ring off and be like, I didn't sign up for this. So I was really scared of what was going to happen. And man, we had a great relationship, and man, she walked into that room and did not bat an eye. Man, I had tubes coming out of every orifice. I still had blood in my hair, when I first got to the hospital 4 days after I was wounded. And man, she walked right up, moved those tubes out of the way, kissed me, and was like, we're gonna get through this. And that was huge. that was huge. That gave me such peace of mind to be like, okay, I got someone in my court. Like, I got my team. And then the other thing that was huge that occurred was when they sent me home, I was a mess. We actually both were afraid when, I mean, I'd been in the hospital for 2 months, and they want to get you out of the hospital. They want to get you as stabilized as best as possible and get you out of the hospital, because the hospital is, people don't heal as well, believe it or not, in a hospital. Infection rates are higher and all these things. So they wanted to get us out of the hospital. So at 2 months, they sent me home in a wheelchair. I had metal coming out of my arm. I'm trached. I got a feeding tube, and we had a 3-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old daughter, and a 7-year-old son. And now she's taking care of this, 32-year-old man baby. And at any point, and she, even though we had a nurse that came to the house, she was cleaning my wounds. She was grinding up my meds and so feeding me, giving me the food that I needed through the stomach tube. She was helping clean my trach, which is disgusting. And never once did she complain. Never once. Never once did she ever say, why did you do this to us? Or why did you pick this career? Because that would have crushed me. And I thought about it. I thought about it at times. Hey, it was my choices that put me here. But never once did she ever say that. And so I think that's a big thing as a spouse and in a relationship. Our spouses aren't perfect, and sometimes bad things happen, and sometimes it may even be their fault. But it benefits no one to poke and prod and say, hey, this sucks right now, and it's your fault or whatever it is. And she never did. And I think that's a big thing that we have really tried to build our relationship on. We're actually writing a relationship book now because so many people ask us about this. So. Yes, Darren.
You just made us better spouses, by the way.
Good.
We were having a chat before your talk, and thank you for your talk. And we were talking about flipping that switch. And obviously, you're humble, you're kind, you're caring, and then you can become a warrior as well. I mean, can you just kind of expand on that and share how that's possible?
Yeah, and I think we need more of that. I think there's an interesting time in America, and I guess this gets a little bit political, I hope not, but that this idea that men who are willing to fight and do things like, that's what's the word I've heard? It's like, I don't know, it's bad. And I disagree with that, although there is a balance, because there's a lot of guys that I meet who ego and insecurity makes them think, well, if I'm a tough guy, I have to be a jerk. And that's just not true. Some of the greatest warriors that I worked with were also some of the nicest, most balanced people. And I think we need to teach more of that to the young men in this country. We need to teach them there is confidence in your ability to defend yourself. There is confidence in your ability to provide and protect the people around you. And I think we need to raise young men and even women at that point to this level to understand that it's not a bad thing to know how to use a gun or a weapon or something to be able to defend yourself in this life. Because unfortunately, there are evil people in this world, man. I have seen them face to face. People who would gladly, I won't even get into things that people are willing to do to others. But the bottom line is, this is why. And we need to teach people that in your brain, that's one side of the brain. That's the warrior protector side. And then on the other side is the side that can be nice and gentle when we need to be. The side, that likes puppies and kittens. And there's nothing wrong with that. To be able to say, hey, man, I love you. There's nothing wrong with that. But also to be able to flip that switch and say, I will fight and even die to protect my family and others around me. And I think that it starts from a young age, and it also starts in the communities. We need to encourage that. There is a balance, but teaching people what that balance is. Yes, sir. Doug.
Have you had the opportunity to speak to a large room of young people? I'd love to hear what their reaction was to the messaging.
I have. I frequently have gotten out. Actually, probably one of the biggest honors is speaking at the academies, because these are the future leaders of not only our military, I mean, many of them go on to be future leaders of this country, whether it's politically or large companies. So I always jump at any opportunity I get to do that. I've also spoke at schools, and obviously sometimes got to bring the message down a little bit, pull back maybe some of the more horrific parts of it. But I don't know, I think the response has always been good. Kids reach out to us and they appreciate it, they understand it. I often talk about being a victor and not a victim. In this life, I think there's aside from COVID, there's another pandemic that's occurring in this country, and it's the victim mindset. That there are a lot of people that are being convinced, well, if you're a specific color, gender, race, creed, religion, whatever, you're a victim. And we need to teach people, man, there's millions of people that have achieved incredible greatness from all those walks of life. And those are the things we need to be shining on, and how do we educate and enable them to be able to go out and do those things. So it resonates. It resonates.
Any other questions?